The most misleading retirement headline in America is not that people claim Social Security too early. It is that there is one smart claiming age and everyone else is simply being irresponsible. That is the real trap. The public keeps hearing the same line. Wait until 70. Get the bigger check. Make the intelligent move. It sounds neat. It sounds mathematical. It sounds like the experts solved the puzzle and the masses just refuse to listen. That is not what is happening. Most Americans are not ignoring a brilliant strategy out of stubbornness. They are colliding with the conditions required to use it. That is a very different story. So let me give you the one mother line that everything in this story serves. The right Social Security strategy is not determined by what sounds optimal in theory. It is determined by whether your health, assets, work capacity, household structure, and cash flow bridge can carry the delay without breaking the rest of your retirement plan. That is the line. Not one ideal age, not one expert slogan, not one heroic act of patience. Fit and funding, because once you understand that, the whole conversation changes. Age 70 stops looking like moral superiority. Age 62 stops looking like automatic foolishness. The decision becomes what it always should have been, a household cash flow design choice under uncertainty. Longevity matters, survivor benefits matter, portfolio size matters, market sequence matters, Medicare timing matters, emotional stress matters. A claiming strategy that ignores those forces is not wisdom. It is performance. That is what people need to hear. Now let me show you the mechanisms. The first mechanism is constraint friction. A lot of retirement commentary still talks as though every household is free to choose from a clean menu of options. Delay bridge with assets. Optimize later. Collect more for life. That sounds elegant. It is often fantasy. Constraint friction means recognizing that most claiming decisions are made under pressure. A modest portfolio, a body that may not want to keep working, rising living costs, limited liquidity, a spouse with different health odds, a job that is no longer sustainable, maybe no pension, maybe no meaningful wage flexibility, maybe no appetite for another 8 years of uncertainty. That is the real environment. If a person needs income now, telling them to wait until 70 is not advanced planning. It is detached advice. Retirement strategies only deserve praise when they are actually implementable. A plan you cannot afford to execute is not a plan. It is a fantasy that quietly insults the person trying to survive. That is constraint friction. And until people accept that, they will keep mistaking necessity for ignorance. Now, let us move to the second mechanism. I call it delay premium. This is the reason the simple headline survives. The increase is real. The bigger check is real. The benefit from waiting is real. That part is not propaganda. If you're full retirement. Age benefit is $2,000 a month. Claiming early can reduce that sharply. Waiting until 70 can push the monthly amount much higher. That increase compounds into every later month of your life. It is inflation adjusted. It is government backed. It does not require you to pick stocks, time markets, or pray that your portfolio behaves itself forever. That is why people love the argument that delay premium is powerful, and in the right setup, it can be one of the best retirement decisions available. But the bigger monthly number is only half the story. The other half is what it costs to get there. You are not just receiving more later, you are forgoing income now, you are buying a larger future check with time, with bridge capital, with health risk, and with whatever strain your household absorbs while waiting. That is the part the headline does not like to say. The increase is real. The carrying cost is also real. That is delay premium. Now let us move to the third mechanism. I call it bridge stress. This is where the whole issue stops being abstract. If you retire before claiming, those years still need to be funded. Food still costs money, housing still costs money, medical life still happens. The gap does not finance itself. That is bridge stress. For a wealthier retiree with strong assets, the bridge years can be strategic. They can spend from the portfolio, perhaps convert tax buckets intelligently, and essentially trade some current capital for stronger guaranteed income later. That can be brilliant. For a modest retiree, the same bridge can become dangerous. If the portfolio is small and the withdrawal burden is high, waiting may force the household to draw too much too early. That means higher sequence of returns risk, less resilience if markets fall, more stress, more dependence on timing, and a very real chance that the portfolio gets weakened so much during the bridge that the smart delay strategy starts undermining the rest of retirement. That is the uncomfortable truth. A bigger future check is not automatically worth it if you had to damage the system to reach it. This is why the same advice can be excellent for one household and reckless for another. The difference is not intelligence. It is bridge capacity, that is bridge stress. Now let us move to the fourth mechanism. I call it longevity shield. This is the strongest case for waiting, and it deserves to be stated clearly if you are healthy, likely to live a long time. And especially if you are worried about outliving your assets, delaying Social Security can act like a powerful form of longevity insurance, that is longevity shield. A bigger inflation adjusted check in your 80s and 90s is not just a larger number. It is a pressure release valve on the rest of the plan. It reduces dependence on portfolio withdrawals later in life when flexibility tends to be lower. And market damage is harder to emotionally tolerate. It can increase peace of mind. It can help preserve other assets. It can make the later decades of retirement more durable. This is why researchers often praise delay so strongly. For the right person, it deserves that praise. Healthy households with stronger assets and real patience are not simply waiting longer. They are buying more guaranteed future income at a time when future income may matter most. That is not theory, that is architecture. But architecture only works when the foundation can support the build. That is why longevity shield is powerful and still not universal. Now let us move to the fifth mechanism. I call it survivor math. This is where the decision stops being individual and becomes familial. For married couples, especially where one spouse earned materially more than the other, the higher earner's claiming choice can shape the survivor's future in ways that many households underestimate. That is survivor math. If the higher earner delays and secures a bigger benefit, that larger benefit can become the survivor benefit later. That means this is not merely a question of my check now versus my check later. It is a question of what income floor the surviving spouse may inherit after one of the two lives ends. That changes everything. Because a widow or widower often faces a cruel compression, one Social Security check disappears, tax treatment can worsen, fixed expenses do not fall as much as people imagine, and the emotional burden is already high. A stronger survivor benefit can matter enormously in that phase. This is why blanket advice is so dangerous in both directions. Always wait is too simplistic. Always claim early is too simplistic. A couple is a sequence, not a single spreadsheet cell. The correct strategy often depends on health differences, age differences, earning differences, and how much security the surviving spouse would actually need. That is survivor math. Now, let us move to the sixth mechanism. I call it portfolio fragility. This is where the claiming decision collides directly with reality for many middle-class retirees. A modest portfolio is not just smaller, it is less forgiving. That is portfolio fragility. Imagine someone retires at 62 with only a few $100,000 and a real spending need. If they delay benefits for years, the portfolio may need to fund an uncomfortably large share of life in the most fragile early phase of retirement. If markets cooperate, maybe the damage is survivable. If markets do not cooperate, the plan can get hurt fast. This is why sequence of returns risk matters so much here. Bad early markets combined with heavy withdrawals create harm that later good returns often cannot fully undo. A larger Social Security check at 70 can still arrive into a much weaker balance sheet than the retiree expected. What looked optimal on the benefits chart turns out to have loaded too much risk into the bridge years. This is why people with modest portfolios often claim earlier. Not because they failed a math test, because they are protecting the system they actually have. That is portfolio fragility. Now let us move to the seventh mechanism. I call it break. even humility. The break, even age is useful. It is not a king. That is what people need to remember. Break, even humility means understanding that the age where delayed claiming starts to pay more in lifetime dollars is one lens, not the whole answer. Yes, it matters. Yes, if you are likely to live past it, delaying often becomes more attractive. But no household actually lives as a break. Even chart, they live as bodies, marriages, job endings, market conditions, caregiver responsibilities, and changing stress thresholds. That is the difference. A person in excellent health with long-lived parents and a strong portfolio should look at break. Even one way, a person with poor health, lower assets, and no bridge room should look at it another way. The mistake is pretending the number ends the discussion. It does not. It only opens the right questions. Can I afford the wait? Who benefits if I wait? What does waiting force my assets to do? What am I insuring against? What am I risking in the meantime? That is break. Even humility. Now I want to force the identity shift, because without it, this still sounds like a Social Security debate instead of a retirement philosophy. Stop thinking like someone trying to guess the smartest age. Start thinking like a household architect. A guesser wants the best number. A household architect wants the strongest structure. A guesser follows the slogan. A household architect models the bridge, the health, the spouse, the portfolio, and the sequence risk. A guesser asks what sounds smartest. A household architect asks what can actually be funded without harming the rest of the plan. That is the stronger identity. Because once you think that way, the whole issue becomes calmer and more honest delay. If it truly serves the plan, claim earlier. If the plan needs present support, protect longevity. If you have the room, protect the portfolio. If you do not, strengthen the survivor if that matters most. Stop looking for a universal answer where only household-specific answers exist. And now let me give you the operating system plainly. First, stop asking for the best claiming age in the abstract. Ask what your actual household can support. Second, model the bridge years carefully. Delaying without funding is not strategy. Third, take longevity seriously. For healthy, long-lived households, delaying can be extremely powerful. Fourth, if you are married, model survivor outcomes. The higher earner's decision often affects both lives, not just one. Fifth, be brutally honest about portfolio size and sequence risk. A modest portfolio changes the answer. Sixth, use break. Even analysis as a tool, not a religion. Seventh, remember that Social Security is part of a retirement system. The right choice is the one that strengthens the whole system, not the headline. That is the heart of it. The reason most Americans do not wait until 70 is not simply that they are ignoring brilliant advice. For many, the wait is either structurally unaffordable, strategically unwise, or unnecessary. That is less catchy than the headline. It is more true. Now let me end where this really matters. You can keep letting experts shame households into believing there is one wise age and one foolish age. You can keep worshiping the bigger future check without counting what the bridge costs. You can keep pretending every retiree has the same health, the same marriage, the same asset base, and the same ability to delay. Or you can do the harder thing. You can model the household, you can model the stress, you can model the bridge, you can model the spouse, you can stop chasing the cleanest public answer and start building the strongest private one, and you can make the claiming decision around the life you actually have. Not the simplified life a headline pretends you have. That is the threshold. Because the right Social Security strategy is not the one that gets applause from commentators. It is the one your household can carry without breaking. That is the mirror. Look into it carefully. If the optimal claiming age would quietly overload your portfolio, lower your quality of life, or create risk your household cannot absorb, then whatever else is true, it is not optimal for you.